Francisco Franco, absolute ruler over Spain, was one of the most enigmatic dictators in European history. Even today, the country still bears the scars of his reign.
That one of his soldiers, in fact, mocked him when he gave an order, and Franco promptly pulled out his pistol and shot him dead.
He seized power in a bloody civil war and ruled the country with an iron hand for 40 years. When unrest broke out in Morocco, Spain was even in danger of losing its last colony. The military was called on to restore order. Franco joined the mission to Africa. When ridiculed by his colleagues for his lack of height, he was only 1.63 meters tall, he reacted with demonstrative severity. It was on the colonial battlefield that Franco made his mark. At the age of 22, he became the youngest captain in the Spanish army. His hallmark was rigid discipline.
The famous story, of course, is that with his little pot belly and his rather squeaky voice, that one of his soldiers, in fact, mocked him when he gave an order, and Franco promptly pulled out his pistol and shot him dead.
In Spain, social tensions were growing. The workers' movement was gaining in power. Conflicts escalated into violence more and more often. King Alfonso and his government seemed paralyzed. The army involved itself in all major issues. Above all, power was in the hands of the elites. King Alfonso gave up and agreed to let the army take control, under the leadership of General Primo de Rivera. He was fascinated by fascism, which was sweeping over the whole of Europe from Mussolini's Italy. Primo de Rivera intended to lead the country out of crisis with the use of violence. Under the military dictatorship, young Francisco Franco's army career took off.
He was the youngest major in the Spanish army. He was the youngest colonel. And above all, he was the youngest general. When he was made brigadier general, Franco was only 33 years old.
As a sign of resistance, the communists called for a general strike. But in many places, the call had virtually no effect. Only in the north, in Asturias, did the miners steadfastly oppose the right-wing government. General Franco was called on, and he intended to make full use of the opportunity which presented itself.
I think that Franco's role in the Asturias Rising was definitely his first major public appearance in Spain, and after that, everybody knew his name.
To combat the miners' resolve, the government sent in its special unit, the Foreign Legion, Franco's battle-hardened Africanistas.
And effectively, the Minister of War says to Franco, I haven't a clue about how to deal with this sort of thing. You're in charge. Obviously, you can't be seen to be in charge, but you devised how you want this to be dealt with. Pass me the documents and I'll sign them. And so for a period of 2 to 3 weeks, Franco has what you could call on-the-job training as a dictator.
Franco was convinced that the revolt was being masterminded by the Bolsheviks. In 20 days, resistance in Asturias was brutally crushed. Franco then ordered reprisals against the local population.
There was no necessity, if you like, to take these reprisals, but the bitterness of the soldiers was so great that they basically thought, we are in conquered country. And this is the interesting thing about the Army of Africa. They virtually saw Spain itself as a foreign country.
The mercenaries went about their task with such savagery that Franco was soon known as the Butcher of Asturias. Nearly 3,000 people were killed and 30,000 arrested. Many were tortured, mutilated, and executed. The general had shown what it meant to oppose him.
So we can certainly say, if not before, by October 1934, Franco is thinking of himself as the saviour of Spain.
As a result of the Asturias Rising, Franco, of course, was almost enemy number one as far as the left was concerned. But of course, as far as the right was concerned, he was seen as the potential saviour even from that particular moment. That is the reason why he was appointed Chief of the General Staff, the most important position in the whole of the army.
And one of the things he does during that time is to start making preparations for a future civil war.
Spain remained politically divided. When new elections were held in 1936, surprisingly, a left-wing coalition, the Frente Popular, emerged victorious. Could democracy survive? Conservatives and the military had long been hatching plans for another coup.
In this situation,
it was clear to the military that unless they took action, they stood no chance, in a democratic way, of stopping a process which was eroding their old interests.
The conspirators were led by General Emilio Mola. Together with other generals, he planned to seize power. But only a few of the conspirators would live to see the new Spain. One of the conspirators, it seems, purposely remained in the background. Francisco Franco Bahamonde. The militarily equipped police force, the Guardia Civil, stood loyally on the side of the Republic. When rumors of the approaching coup began to circulate, the government banished the generals to the provinces. Franco was transferred to the Canary Islands.
And the one thing Franco knew was that you cannot run a coup against the civil guard. And he was actually very, very lucky with the way things worked out, not to be put in jail.
In exile on Tenerife, the neutralized general made himself at home. He learnt English, played golf, and in secret, continued to pull the strings for a coup. The assassination of a right-wing politician in Madrid provided the initial spark. In the capital, violence erupted. The generals believed that their time had come. The coup began on July the 17th in Spanish Morocco. Franco led the rebels in the Canary Islands and wanted to join forces with the Africanistas as quickly as possible. Only the military commander of the Canary Islands, General Amado Balmes, could prevent Franco from doing this, but he had been killed the day before in an alleged hunting accident.
Fue asesinado por orden de Franco.
He was murdered on Franco's orders, and Franco also ordered the subsequent cover-up, a myth to prevent the truth from ever coming to light. That says a lot about Franco, because it reveals his character. He treads carefully, looks ahead, and is cunning, and he has no scruples whatsoever.
The next day, Franco flew to Morocco. His aim was to occupy southern Spain with the Africanistas. General Mola's troops advanced from the north. The elected government realized the gravity of the situation and issued a call to arms. Off Gibraltar, warships loyal to the Republic blocked the straits. For the time being at least, Franco's Africanista army was prevented from landing in Spain. Yet his troops in particular were of great importance to the coup.
Of all the various generals with all their various jobs, Franco is the one who is in charge of the one part of the Spanish armed forces that actually works.
But Franco had a plan and good contacts with the Nazis in Germany.
Franco's first contact came before the Civil War, particularly with Admiral Canaris, the head of the Abwehr, who he'd met on numerous occasions. Canaris used to travel frequently to Spain. He was very much of a Hispanophile, and he certainly was keeping contact and realized that Franco was obviously the rising power within the Spanish army and must have sought him out.
As an ardent admirer of the composer, every summer Hitler attended the Wagner Festival in Bayreuth. Franco asked two German business friends from Morocco for help. He wanted Johannes Bernhard and Adolf Langenheim to make contact with Hitler. The two members of the National Socialist Party traveled especially to Bayreuth and handed Hitler a personal letter from Franco.
It's certainly true that it was, shall we say, a good moment for them to have gone to see Hitler at Bayreuth, because, of course, Hitler was very emotional during the period of the Wagner season at Bayreuth. And, of course, it was typical that Goering immediately wanted to call the operation Sauberfeuer, purely because of the final act.
Hitler acted immediately. He sent transport aircraft to Morocco and 6 fighter planes as an escort.
Without that air bridge, the coup would have collapsed. So Germany must bear much of the responsibility for the civil war ever erupting.
On the side of the Republic, a left-wing alliance of socialists, communists, and anarchists stood united against big money. Socialist groups urged workers to take control of their places of work. Factories were occupied and their owners locked up or even shot. Profits from labor were no longer to end up solely in the pockets of the rich. Agricultural workers also revolted and fought for the collectivization of farmland. The unrest in Barcelona alone cost 400 lives, and often the fronts were blurred. The battles between hostile groups were never ending.
I think all of the generals expected the war would last a couple of weeks. Franco, I think, was one of the few who thought that it would last longer. Now, that's not to say he thought it would last 3 years, but he was more cautious than the others.
For some time now, the most diverse groups had also been fighting alongside Franco. Thousands took up arms. Monarchists who wanted to see King Alfonso back on the throne, Carlists who wanted a Bourbon as regent, and the Falange Española who glorified fascism. Franco saw that the armed fascists could be very useful to him. In April, he declared the Falange to be the official state party and placed himself at its head. As they marched on Madrid, the rebels destroyed everything in their path, even if it was of no military importance.
He once said, "I'd have no problem killing half of Spain just to stop it becoming Marxist." He really said that.
Thousands of corpses paved Franco's way to power.
I mean, even the Germans were shocked and the Italians were shocked at times by the cruelty he showed.
There's one point where he says to the Italian ambassador, Mussolini's ambassador, "I have to conquer Spain square centimetre by square centimetre, because I have to control the people who live on the land. When Hitler talks of a 1,000-year Reich, for Franco, that's short-term thinking.
Every potential opponent was arrested or disappeared under mysterious circumstances. Federico García Lorca, one of Spain's most famous poets, also fell victim to the systematic cleansing. His body was simply buried by the roadside. Lorca's murder, and that of thousands of other civilians, was seen far beyond Spain's borders as a symbol of the barbarity of the Civil War. The world was shocked as it learned more and more about the carnage. Franco had already taken the south and stabilized his front outside Madrid. Now he advanced into northern Spain. In April 1937, his troops set their sights on the Basque town of Guernica. Guernica had been a holy place for the Basques and a symbol of their independence ever since the 14th century. A bridge in the center of town was seen as being of strategic importance to the Republicans. Allegedly, when Franco called for the German bombers, the bridge was to be the sole target. The Condor Legion dropped some 30 tons of bombs on the town, killing around 300 of its citizens. Incredibly, in the end, the bridge remained intact, whereas the entire town was in flames. 80% of the buildings had been destroyed. Von Richthofen wrote, "Guernica, a town of 5,000 inhabitants, literally razed to the ground. The start of the blaze and the collapse of several buildings was very interesting to observe. The negligible fire brigade presence brought from San Sebastián was powerless." There was a perfidious purpose behind the seemingly indiscriminate bombing: for the German Air Force to practice under real conditions for Hitler's forthcoming war. Much of what happened in the Basque Country was repeated later in Poland. For Hitler, Guernica was nothing more than training for the Second World War. In reaction to the bombing, Picasso painted Guernica. Shown at the 1937 World Fair in Paris, the work became world famous as a symbol of the suffering of the Spanish people.
Guernica is the first total destruction of an unprotected town in the history of warfare.
Franco had outlived all his rivals. The founder of the fascist movement, Primo de Rivera, was executed by the Republicans. Many of the former co-conspirators had fallen into enemy hands and been killed. Only General Mola could still have contested his claim to power in Spain. But he died in an air crash in 1937. The cause of the accident has never been established. The province of Aragon in the north was one of the few regions still held by the Republicans. Resistance was strongest in 𝘏𝘪𝘃. Franco deployed all his military forces there. They attacked the town for 2 weeks. Finally, 𝘏𝘃 was destroyed and Aragon fell. Franco now held virtually the whole of Spain. His triumph seemed almost certain. But it was not until July 1938 that the decisive battle took place. On the Ebro, a river in southwest Catalonia. Franco himself took part in the battle, one of the longest and most brutal of the entire war. In the end, it is said the river ran red with blood. What was still missing were the cities. For months, Franco laid siege to Madrid and Barcelona. Cut off from the outside world, their citizens starved. And for weeks on end, the two cities were bombed nearly every day.
En el día de hoy, cautivo y desarmado el Ejército Rojo, han alcanzado las tropas nacionales sus últimos objetivos militares. La guerra ha terminado.
The cost? 500,000 dead, through warfare and terror. After 3 years of civil war, the small boy from 𝘏𝘪𝘴𝘵𝘰𝘳𝘺 was ruler of Spain. Franco had achieved his goal, but his reign of terror was only just beginning.